So as part of Trump's effort to deport migrants, he created this special zone around a military base on the border of New Mexico and Mexico. And they charged people who went through that border because that was a special zone that you could not cross. Well, a federal judge has just thrown out these cases. Let's discuss. I'm Dave Aronberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County, aka the Florida LawMan, here on Legal AF. Thank you for all your subscriptions, for all your support. Hit that subscribe button. Let's talk about whether it's a trespass if you don't know that it's a restricted area. If a tree falls in the forest and no one's around, does it make a sound? Well, it's the same thing when it comes to trespass, because you have to have signs up. You have to have notice. That's why when you go to a place you're not supposed to, you see those big signs, no trespassing. Okay, you're on notice. That's the law. But if you go on that property and there is no sign and you don't know and you reasonably believe you have a right to be there, well, you're not going to be charged. And if you are charged, those charges will likely be dropped. And that's sort of what happened here by a federal judge. So according to the New York Times, the following happened. A federal judge this week dismissed charges against nearly 100 migrants detained under a Trump administration effort to arrest undocumented migrants for trespassing on a newly declared national defense zone along New Mexico's border with Mexico. The order from a federal magistrate judge, Gregory B. Wormuth, added to the confusion and legal turmoil that have gripped New Mexico in the months since President Trump declared a ribbon of land along a 180-mile length of the state's southern border to be an army base. Around 400 migrants had been charged with willfully violating security regulations, misdemeanor charges that can carry up to a year in jail. The arrests, which Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was praising just last Friday, had swamped local jails and every day brought dozens of shackled migrants into a federal courtroom to face the novel charges. So they had this press conference. They proclaimed to their base how tough they're getting on migrants. They created a new zone. And even though there weren't a lot of signs, and those signs weren't in Spanish, the individuals were arrested, charged, and now the charges are dropped. So what happens when those television cameras are turned off and the lights are turned off? Yeah, that's when justice is dispensed. And in this case, justice meant those charges had to be dropped. Judge Wormuth, a former federal prosecutor, said the federal government had failed to show that the migrants actually knew they were unlawfully entering a restricted military area. He has dismissed charges against 98 migrants so far as he works through the docket. The United States provides no facts from which one could reasonably conclude that the defendant knew he was entering the New Mexico National Defense Area, the newly declared military installation, Judge Wormuth ruled. Defense lawyers said some migrants were arrested before the government put up signs warning that the area was restricted. Others crossed between signs, arrived exhausted in the dark, or unable to read the warnings, lawyers said. It's just a bunch of desert, said Carlos Ibarra, a defense lawyer. They're just coming over the same as usual, and all of a sudden it's military charges. Nobody knows what's going on. So you have this magistrate judge who agreed, but keep in mind, the migrants are going to still face charges of entering the United States illegally and are likely to face deportation. So they're not going to be just released necessarily. They're going to still face the basic charges, although they can seek asylum. But the ruse of saying you're a trespasser now in an area where no one told you it was an illegal area, where if they did tell them the signs were all in English, knowing that the people who would be in that area only spoke Spanish, and the signs were placed apart far enough where some people didn't even see them. So, yeah, those charges are going to be dropped, even though most of those individuals will still likely be deported and still face the regular charges they normally would have, which is crossing into the United States illegally. According to the New York Times, since the new military area was established, volunteers who scour the desert for the remains of perished migrants have started to worry that they could be arrested. Hikers determined to traverse the storied 3,100-mile Continental Divide Trail to Canada face legal uncertainties since their trek begins or ends at the border. Hunters who frequent the wide-open public lands in the area are worried about running into active duty troops when they are out stalking quail or white-tailed deer. Yeah, that's some of your own voters. You got the hunters out there who could get arrested because that no trespassing applies to everyone. You can't just say no trespassing for non-American citizens. It's either a no trespassing zone or a legitimate area where you can traverse. But here, they're going to have to arrest others too, or else there are violations of equal protection, among other issues dealing with the arrest of these undocumented migrants. So yes, those charges are doomed. Those charges are going to be thrown out. I don't see the magistrate's decision being overturned by a court, although again, it won't have a material impact on whether they stay in the United States. And because it's a military base, you have military troops there on the border. See, it's another way of getting the military there, and that could be a violation of federal law, the Posse Comitatus Act. And so that's another question about this new territory that they've created. According to the New York Times, Major Jeffrey A. Carmichael, a spokesman for the Joint Task Force Southern Borders, said military personnel had not detained anyone so far in the administration's newly declared national defense areas along the southern border. He said they had helped detect more than 150 unauthorized trespassers. In response to the case dismissals of migrants the military helped to apprehend, Major Carmichael said that the task force's authority ends where the U.S. Border Patrol's law enforcement responsibilities begin, and that adjudication was the responsibility of the Department of Justice, not the Department of Defense. Still, critics said they were uneasy about thousands of active duty troops in armored combat vehicles patrolling American soil so close to home. It's beginning to feel like an occupation, said Sarah Silva, a Democratic state representative from Las Cruces. It's putting people on edge. Local officials said they were still unsure where the military's authority now began and ended in the unmarked vastness of the Southwest open public spaces. What is the current public access status of the land? Senator Martin Heinrich, a New Mexico Democrat, asked in a letter to Mr. Hegseth on Wednesday. Are these areas now closed to public entry, or are they still accessible to U.S. citizens? So far, no American citizens appear to have been arrested and charged with trespassing in the military areas, but the federal court in Las Cruces, which handles border-related offenses, has been inundated with undocumented defendants before the judge began dismissing cases. While border crossings are down sharply, public defenders say the legal system in New Mexico was facing an onslaught of cases because federal prosecutors were criminally charging nearly every person apprehended along the border rather than turning them back to Mexico. The authorities were having trouble finding enough jail beds, defense lawyers said, an issue not likely to be immediately resolved, despite the judge's dismissal of some of the trespassing charges. So that's the latest back and forth when it comes to this aggressive attempt to try to deport undocumented migrants. Sometimes you're going to get American citizens caught up in it. Sometimes you're going to get the laws overturned. Sometimes you're going to get people who have been arrested and detained. Well, you're going to have their charges dropped. And then who's left to pick up the pieces? Taxpayers of New Mexico, the local communities that are inundated with these repeated arrests. Even after the charges are dropped, there's still a burden on the local community. So perhaps it's going to work itself out. But you're talking about the state of New Mexico, which is a blue state. And you wonder how much of that is that they're being punished for being a blue state. It's hard to say these days where you draw the line between policy and politics. So that's the latest. I'm Dave Aronberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County, a.k.a. the Florida LawMan. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share with a friend, leave a comment below. Thank you for helping Legal AF get well over 600,000 subscribers. And I'll see you next time.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.